Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. If you're a returning subscriber, thank you so much. This is Fiona at Drawings in a Drawer and I upload a video every Sunday and I talk about watercolour. And this is the third episode of our Painting Expressive Watercolour Portraits. And I think this series is not going to end here because I feel I have so much more to explore and so much more to delve into, and this journey is really helping me. So there's definitely going to be more episodes, but they might be split. There might be a slight pause because probably next week I will be uploading the shorter version of my episode from the Learning from the Master series, which my patrons requested. And then I will be going back to this series the week after that. So you can definitely be expecting more of this exploration and journey into painting loose with watercolour. Here you see me painting Bella Baxter, who is a character played by Emma Stone in the movie or film Poor Things. I really liked this character and I wanted to paint her. I painted her on Arches cold pressed paper, which means it's textured, which is usually my go-to paper for cold pressed. And to me this was a bit of a warm-up exercise. I wasn't really trying to be particularly expressive, though I really like how that background turned out and I like the use of colour on her face. I like how her hair turned out. Using different colours in the skin, like green, which you see me using here, is something that really helps us get expressive with the watercolour portrait. And don't be afraid to look at skin and to see the colours that actually are in different skin tones and to maybe even exaggerate them a little bit. And I think that is really important. We can also do this in the hair. We can add reflections with colours that look slightly unusual. This really helps with becoming more loose and creative when it comes to painting with this beautiful medium. At the same time, it's important to always remember how fundamental values are, and by values of course I mean tones, mid-tones, light tones and dark tones. Usually we will have a few dark values, like the darkest values in the painting, and we will have them in several spots around the painting, so not only in one area, but we really have to make sure that we are seeing where the darkest values are and that they are the same depth in the right areas, so that we have that balance between being expressive, being loose, but also bringing the eye in deep to the darkest areas that really create dimension in a painting. And since I've decided I'm really going to use my sketchbooks a lot, I went and bought an Etcher sketchbook in cold press because I did not have this version of the Etcher Lab sketchbook. I only have the hot press paper one. So I decided to try it, and as you can see we have the little logo here, and I have to say that I was impressed when I opened it up because the paper, which as I mentioned is cold pressed and it is 100% cotton and it's around I think 220, 230 GSM, so not as thick as I'm used to painting on, is very lightly textured, so to me it almost resembles hot pressed paper more, which is such a happy place for me because I love hot pressed paper, but sometimes I miss the properties of cold pressed paper too. And this is such a happy in-between area where basically you have the best of both worlds. As you can see, I've sketched in a portrait and I freehanded it, so maybe there are some imbalances in it. But that's fine. I'm clipping the paper down with some clips because I don't want it to buckle, and I'm diving into this painting again, trying to be as loose and as expressive as I can. I go in with some very random brush strokes at the beginning just to kind of get that feeling of being outside the box, so to speak. And of course, as usual, I tend to start wet and wet so that I have little control anyway, and it's more difficult to try and steer myself towards more precision. The eyes are always one of the first areas that I start working on, as are the lips, because to me the focus almost always lies in these two spots, so it's kind of a comfort zone for me. But again, as you can see, I'm painting, not covering all the white of the paper, letting the colours blend and mix on the surface. And I'm using very small brushes when I have to go into fine lines or the opening of the mouth. I have decided to try doing that instead of using large brushes when I go into detail. It may seem obvious, but it wasn't that obvious to me for some reason. I showed you this piece in the previous episode, and I'm very interested in the background of this old painting, and I want to use it in this one. I think sometimes we can be quite expressive with backgrounds as well. So I started in with this brown, and I just laid it down, and then I went in with neutral tint, or black, I think it's black, and I painted on top of that. And I tried to be very rough and raw with my brush strokes, as you can see, and by the end I hardly have any water on my bristles at all, so that you can see the actual texture on the paper, which I think is very interesting to look at. So I really like how this background turned out, and it's quite unusual for me. For the third painting in this episode, I decided to go for a limited palette, and I found this Cobalt Teal by M. Graham. I have a small set of these watercolours, and I noticed that the binder, I think that's the binder and the paint that have come apart inside the tube. So I was just showing that to the camera to get your opinion about that, if that's ever happened to you and if that is the binder. If you know, please let me know in the comments. And then I'm mixing some Terre Ercolano by Daniel Smith and Naples Yellow by Winsor & Newton. Again, I have collected a lot of watercolour paints over the years, but that absolutely does not mean that you need this many. Indeed, you don't. Anyway, I really like the idea of this limited palette, and I went in and painted this eye. It was so much fun. I enjoyed this, but again, eyes really are my comfort zone, so it's much easier for me to paint loose and expressive when I'm painting something I'm very confident with. And indeed, if you want to paint expressive eyes, I have a class on Skillshare for the expressive eye, and I also have a class on my Patreon, and you'll find the links to everything down below. So I kept to the original palette. I think I just went in and added violet. I always give in and reach for violet. And I mixed that cobalt teal with the red with a Terre Ercolano to obtain a darker value to go around the eye. Again, I cannot stress enough how important it is to not forget about the darkest value and to get that in there. And here I'm really using a thick mixture of watercolour paint. I basically have no water on my brush at all, but I do have a lot of paint, as you can see, and I'm just adding some like brush strokes, some touches of thick colour, just to experiment really. I'd never done this before, and I think it's quite interesting. I have to say I definitely didn't have nearly as much time as I'd hoped for to paint this week, so I'm excited for this series to go on, and I hope that you will keep watching it, because I really want you to see what we can do together. But yeah, this is how the eye turned out, and I think it was pretty cool. I love how I started out this painting. I managed to forget about the camera, and I was just having such fun using this blue and this red. I think it's Indian red and cerulean blue, and literally just being in the zone. I'm not 100% convinced about how it turned out in the end. You will see that later on, but anyway. I have to say I still have so many things to say and so much to share with you that I am happy that I will be able to create more footage and have time to narrate it properly. I can hardly believe that now I feel that I don't have enough time to say what I want to say, whereas before I always seemed to struggle with what to say. Now it seems to come natural to me the more I talk to you and the more I feel like I want to share.
I'm getting this magical idea where she is like a cliff on a beach, on a shore. So we have the waves crashing down here in these splatters of cerulean blue and also some, I think it's burnt sienna. If I have more burnt sienna kind of towards the bottom, down here, maybe it could represent the beach, for example. So I'm splattering some down here, so having more of that towards the bottom. Maybe I would use a larger brush for it. Some of the splatters have gone up here, and as you can see, since it's very wet, they are spreading out. So I'm going to pick those up because they don't look bad actually. In the colours, it looks good in the painting, but I don't want them to spread out too much, so I can pick them up, lift them with my kitchen paper. But I just had the idea, and that is why sketchbooks are so important at the end of the day. You really allow yourself to do things that maybe you wouldn't do. I started this without thinking about what it would be and how it would turn out, and now I end up with an idea for a bigger painting, for something that excites me. So that is good about sketchbooks, definitely. Something that should make you think about approaching sketchbooks if you're not painting in them yet. And you might know that I don't really love sketchbooks. I didn't used to love them. There's a video about that on here. I think it's called something like, do you hate your sketchbook? You will find it just scrolling back in my YouTube feed. But let's go on with this.
today. I had so little time. I've already run out of time. Thank you so much for being here. Find me on Patreon, find me on Skillshare, find me on Instagram, or just follow me on here. I am so grateful. See you next time. Bye.